In the name of the living God, who is Blessed Trinity. Amen. Yesterday was the burial service for the Reverend Andy Parker. And Andy most recently was rector of Emmanuel Episcopal in Houston. And prior to that, for many years, Andy was rector of St. Timothy's in Lake Jackson. And it was a gift to meet Andy through the years that I had been in the Diocese of Texas at different clergy events. And Andy and I learned that we had something, or we shared something in common. His ordaining bishop and godfather to one of his sons has been my spiritual director for almost 10 years, a man named Sam Halsey. Sam's a retired bishop of Northwest Texas. And seldom was there a time when Andy and I would share a meal at clergy conference that we didn't share some story about Sam or the most recent conversation. If Sam is now in his mid-50s, and still refuses to do anything with computers. Internet is just a word to him. So he doesn't want to learn. He doesn't want somebody to teach him. For instance, a couple years ago, Sam said there was an article he wanted me to read. Doesn't send me the link. He sends me a hard copy of the article he sent. And when I got it in the mail, the envelope seemed heavier than what you might expect for just a quick article. And when I opened it up, I had the article in it and a handwritten note that said, "When you finish with this, please send this on." And in it, Sam had included a stamped envelope to be sent to his successor as bishop in Northwest Texas. So that is the way Sam communicated, and Andy and I always had the joy of talking about Sam. And we realized, thankfully, that Sam Halsey's fingerprints, his influence is all over our lives and ministry. So why might it be relevant today to think about a person's influence on your life, like Sam Halsey is for me? And I encourage you today to spend some time reflecting upon your own life and those one or two or three people that hold that special place in your life. You know, the kind of influence and place that when you tell the story of your life, you have to include these people. Your life story wouldn't make sense without these. And I think we all have those kinds of people in our lives. See, Sam is still a very faithful witness to Jesus' love. But when I think about him and his role in my life, there's something else. He's not only a faithful witness, he goes beyond that and he embodies the love of Jesus. It's as if he embodies Jesus whenever we meet and whenever Sam goes out and meets anybody and encounters anybody in his life. So that when someone sees Sam, it's like they get to experience the love of God. When he leaves the room, as if people can say, "I think I just met God." Our gospel lesson on this first Sunday after Christmas Day for all 3 years comes from John's first chapter. And it's a different reading than Matthew and Luke's birth stories. John is just talking theology. And it begins with those words that we've heard many times. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In John's gospel, he starts at the very beginning by talking about Jesus. that Jesus was with God, Jesus is God. And then goes on to say, near the end of our lesson, and the Word became flesh and lived among us. That God that created takes on flesh and lives the lives that we've lived. That Jesus has come to live with us. So that what we get in John's gospel is not a discussion about this concept of God as if God is somewhere far away, but that God in Jesus has come to be where we are, has come to step in life and walk through a life with all of its rhythms, much like we face, so that Jesus is flesh and lives with us. The God is here. So why is this important? Because if you put it on your calendar to come back next year for the first Sunday after Christmas Day, we're going to be good Episcopalians, so we're going to read the same lesson again next year. We're going to hear this again. But why is this important? That Jesus Christ incarnate lived as we live. Well, if we want to know what love is like, it's not for us to have to figure out a definition for what love is. We look and we need to know Jesus. If we want to know what love is, we need to know Jesus. If we want to experience grace and forgiveness, the chance to start again, the chance to come back home when we think we know the answers ourselves, a chance to start over. If we want to know what that's like, we need to experience Jesus. If we want to understand and sense what inclusion is all like, that we're the ones that make a category of stranger. If we want to know what inclusion looks like, we look at Jesus. Where Jesus takes somebody that others might call a stranger, and Jesus brings them in. That in Jesus there is no stranger. There's the same thing that's called to each one of us, the loved child of God. We don't have to figure out what that looks like. We look to see Jesus. And if we want to know what a life of service looks like, and if you've been baptized, this is what we affirm for all of us, that by virtue of our baptism, we should have a life of faith that is active and lived out. We don't have to make that up. We look to see Jesus. So what this means is the incarnation of Jesus, the birth of Jesus. What we celebrate in December each year is intricately tied through the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. So Christmas and Easter is always intended to go together. That Jesus is with us. And that Jesus that is with us is the Jesus that died for us. And the Jesus that died for us is the Jesus that has risen. And because Jesus is risen, we get to taste that resurrection. So it means for us as we live out our faith, we live not with an opportunity to escape the difficulties of life, not for a plan to escape death, but to face life knowing death no longer has the final say. So why is any of this important? Why is me beginning talking about a personal friend named Sam Holsey important? Because our calling is to do this kind of embodying. To take the grace that we all have received and embody that out in the world. to show the world what love looks like, to show the world what grace and forgiveness looks like, to show the world what inclusion looks like, to show the world what service looks like. We've all received Jesus' love and grace. Our task is to leave and share that with others. This is good news because it leaves salvation as God's business. Now, we've probably forgotten that and thinking in a conversation with somebody, if I argue just a little bit stronger, I'll get them convinced. If I push just a little bit further, I'll finally get you to say okay and you'll come over to my side. You'll join my team. That, I think, is God's business. Ours, simply to make a witness. To take what we've received and to share that with others. And then reflect with me about your own life. I'll be reflecting about mine. That when we encounter people, whoever that might happen in our own lives, when we meet somebody, we've engaged with them somehow, and then we part ways. Can that other person look at our life and say, you know what? I think I see the fingerprints of Jesus all over them.